Hey there. Welcome to The Hash and happy Friday to you. You're watching CoinDesk TV and we're glad you're here. Thanks for being with me, Zach Seward. I'm also joined by Sonali Handagama, David Morris, and Jen Sanasi with the polka dots. Hey-yo. Nice dots.
I
Good
was going to
stuff.
say,
All
I
right.
love your shirt. So festive.
Hey, it's so nice out. Why not bring out the, tropical attire? All right. Well, enough of the fashion desk. Well, we should get a fashion desk wipe now that we have a metaverse, by the way. So control, get on that, please. But we're going to go to a bit more of a drab topic. Well, not so drab, a little bit spicy, actually. We're going to DC to look at some political theater up on Capitol Hill. David, take it away.
Yes. So we have sort of a two-bagger here. Senator Elizabeth Warren has introduced some new legislation. But before we get into that, we're going to look at a brief clip from one of the co-founders of Chainalysis testifying before the Senate Banking Committee hearing yesterday about crypto and illicit finance in a one-on-one with Senator Warren herself. So can we roll that?
How about depositing tokens in wallets that don't require identifying information?
You can always split the money up into wallets that don't require...
And that would help hide the money. And how about using a mixing service?
That doesn't remove the record of where the money actually sits.
But the question I'm asking is, does it make it harder to track the money?
No, so it doesn't make it harder to track the money because
using a mixing service, you're telling me, doesn't make it harder to launder money?
The daily liquidity value of mixing services globally is about $30 million.
So you might have to do this day by day?
And we have done extensive work in tracking large sums of money through mixers that have led to the arrests of people and the disruption of their activity.
You know, I'm actually a little surprised by your answers.
So I don't know what everybody's takeaway from that is, but I think it's quite interesting to hear Warren again, sort of not wanting to hear the facts. It's to me, it sounds like we'll get into that, but to just sort of rewind slightly to the bill that she introduced. The irony here is that the bill itself is not that crazy by some measures. The main provision would give financial regulators in the U.S. the power to sanction crypto trading platforms or exchanges located abroad if they violate U.S. sanctions. That's already how banking works around the world and how sanctions work. If you are a financial institution that violates sanctions, you get sanctioned, and that's why they're so powerful. The other provision of this bill would require Americans who conduct a $10,000 transaction abroad to report that, which is, not necessarily everybody's favorite, but also not out of line with existing regulations. So we have a couple of different things to talk about here. I don't know if anybody wants to offer their assessment of that Warren exchange, which, by the way, she specifically talked about somebody trying to launder $1 billion worth of crypto, which is why the daily volume on mixers was such an important response. But anybody want to take it away? What are we looking at here?
I wish Naomi was here. This would be such a good Naomi topic. She would go hard. She would go in on this one. I will say this was a bit much. Elizabeth Warren really wanted her story to be true, and the facts didn't really comport with that. And what we saw was sort of a sad attempt to make a point that wasn't going to be supported by the facts of how the blockchain works. Chainalysis is known for bringing down child porn rings, all sorts of bad stuff, illicit transactions. They can do this because it's an open ledger that they can track even through mixers, which was disclosed. I think with the DAO hack from 2016, Laura Shin disclosed that, Chainalysis was a part of tracking down those funds that had been mixed over and over and over. Still, again, as was mentioned in the clip, there is a record of where they're coming from and where they're going. And there's plenty of big business, whether it's Chainalysis, Elliptic, you name it. There's plenty of firms out there who are in the business of tracking those transactions and helping law enforcement catch bad guys. So I think the senator was trying to make a point that, again, didn't jibe with the facts there. And I think, crypto Twitter certainly took her to task for it yesterday, and maybe rightly so. I mean, she was not listening generously to that guy who was trying to offer some technical insight into what was happening. But definitely saw a lot of chatter about this one yesterday, and some good memes as well. Jen, I saw your hand up. I'm tossing it to you.
Yeah, watching that clip was so frustrating. We talk about education so much, and regulators and lawmakers and politicians, being more educated so that we can actually walk into the future together in a way that promotes innovation and that falls under regulation. And this clip just showed that, Warren wasn't interested in being educated. She, in this specific clip, was interested in pushing the same narrative that I feel like we've heard over and over again. And so that was really frustrating. Like Zach said, I think that was encapsulated on Twitter. I'm super frustrated. But I want to bring up another point in the article. So aside from the sanctions, I thought this was really interesting. There's another provision that would authorize FinCEN to identify users transacting with more than $10,000 in crypto. So the bill says that no later than 120 days after the date of enactment, U.S. people engaged in transactions with more than $10,000 in digital assets would have to report that. Now, there's no definition on what digital assets are, and there's no information on how this reporting would look. And so I just feel like they're using what's happening in Russia and the sanctions narrative to slowly introduce more confusing provisions that they will be able to use to their own benefit later. Because I don't really see how they can what's the word I'm looking for? How they can act on these provisions. And so I see them, picking and choosing who they go after. But David, I saw your hand up.
Well, I mean, just to respond to what you said, I mean, sanctions are all about picking and choosing, right? Like the standards are used as, they're used on a political basis, not to say that they're used unjustly, but not everybody faces the same consequences. I was just going to rewind slightly and sort of focus on one of the really embarrassing parts of the video exchange, which is where Warren doesn't believe that moving something into another wallet doesn't make it harder to trace. And that's just such a basic misunderstanding. I mean, anybody who is in crypto knows that like just splitting a transaction into a bunch of different transactions doesn't do anything at all to obscure it. And that I think was really the part that struck me the most as just kind of reflecting a willful ignorance, frankly. And I'm certainly not some huge political opponent of Warren on a lot of other things, but it's really depressing in this particular case. Sandali, I don't know if you wanted to chime in on this topic before we move on to our next news item.
Yeah, thanks. I was just thinking, this is really interesting because we recently had the Ukrainian government make some official requests to crypto exchanges that were providing services to Russian users. And CoinDesk covered this in detail. The government basically asked these exchanges to block all Russian users so that there would be no risk of avoiding sanctions. The exchanges came back with a resounding no, saying that they're monitoring transactions to find potential sanctions violations, and they're not going to place a blanket ban on users in Russia. But I don't know, this bill sounds a little like it would make it possible for the US government to do just that. I don't know, David, if you or anyone else kind of got that vibe, to tell exchanges to kind of stop if they want to.
Well,
it's a lot of
I think this is a great example of some mixed signals being used to pursue an agenda that's not entirely obvious, because when you're talking about those exchanges that refuse to block Russian users, those are not sanctioned individuals. Those are just people who happen to reside in Russia. We're not talking about, the oligarchs and other people who are part of the Putin regime, they're sanctioned, and those crypto exchanges are already legally obliged to intervene in those transactions. The U.S. was asking them to do more than the sanctions required. And the bill that Warren is introducing would not actually force them to do what they were being asked to on a political basis and refuse to. So that's like two different things. And I think that it's very interesting that there was this public pressure to say, like, crypto exchanges, do this thing that the law does not require. And then when the crypto exchanges did not do that, that was used as a cudgel to bully them and beat them up further and to push for new regulations that actually don't push for the thing that they wanted them to do in the first place. So anyway, I think Sandali has our next story as well.
Yes, I do. So on Thursday, Argentina's Senate seemingly approved a debt deal worth $45 billion with the IMF, which includes a provision that seems to promise discouraging the use of cryptocurrencies in the country. The provision, which was part of a letter of intent from the Argentine government, says, to further safeguard financial stability, we are taking important steps to discourage the use of cryptocurrencies with a view to preventing money laundering, informality, and disintermediation. Argentina has quite a long history of economic challenges, from large debt obligations to high inflation, made worse by the pandemic. And these issues may have actually contributed to the country sort of becoming a kind of crypto hub in the region. CoinDesk has written about how people in Argentina have turned to cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and even stable coins during spikes in inflation or when the government imposed strict forex controls. I spoke to our Latin America editor, Andres, who covered this news, and he says the government may not fully understand crypto or what this provision might actually mean. He also said that the statement is quite vague and it's unclear what discourage means in a practical sense. So he's trying to get more details on this. I'm going to hand it off to David because I know you had some thoughts on this.
Yeah, and in fact, if you're a subscriber to our newsletter, The Node, you will be getting an essay, if you haven't already, in your inbox about the broader context of the IMF and its efforts to control crypto. It's a bit of a windmill that I tilt at a lot. But I guess the capsule version here is this is a follow-on to what we saw about 6 months ago when the IMF was responding to El Salvador's move to integrate Bitcoin more directly into its financial system, which was to sort of threaten its loans. And the IMF, I won't go into too much depth, but the IMF is essentially the economic power arm of the European American neoliberal order that is currently dominant. And so the use of these kinds of provisions in IMF loans to countries in trouble is very similar to what Warren is trying to do in the US Senate, but on a global scale to push back against the encroachment and growth of crypto. Because the IMF essentially is the gatekeeper, and that's a quote from a researcher from the Center for Economic Progress, a gatekeeper of the entire global kind of distressed debt system. So there's the World Bank, there are other development banks, and the IMF is basically the one who controls whether you get any of that money. And with crypto, as we've seen in El Salvador and now in Ukraine, you can get those direct donations and or loans or bond issuances even on the blockchain are happening now. And you don't need the IMF. And there are reasons that is threatening to the power structure. And so you see this pressure coming down. So that's my brief version of the big picture. And I think that a lot of people have plenty of other contributions to make on the subject of the IMF and crypto.
David, I was really going to say a lot of the same thing that you were going to say. You know, the IMF has such a history of setting conditions attached to its loans that are like really harsh and don't really help the economies of the countries that they are going into, quote unquote, help. Then we look at inflation. It's 52% in Argentina. And we've seen story after story of the Argentine people adopting crypto in forms of cards that give them back Bitcoin rewards and using different crypto so that they can just operate on a day-to-day there, so that they can just live their lives because the money is quite literally just inflating away. It's not worth much. And so I think that the IMF has seen what's happening in South America. I think they've seen what's happening in El Salvador, and this shows that they are definitely paying attention and they're a little bit scared. I mean, we look at the provision, it's vague, Sandali, like you said that the government there doesn't really understand crypto. And this is something that we hear not only in South American countries, not only in developing countries, but right here in North America as well. And so I think this just shows me that the IMF sees real potential in blockchain and crypto, and that they are afraid of what it is doing for this behemoth that they have created to capitalize on the developing world. Zach.
No, I think that context, that historical context with inflation, I mean, that's the story here to me, right? I mean, there's a reason why Argentina has been sort of a standout as it relates to crypto adoption in the Western Hemisphere, right? Projects from MakerDAO all the way down have been focusing efforts in Argentina to make sure that these stable coins are available to people so that they have money that is more valuable over time, because they've seen a lot of those savings being inflated away again and again. So it is weird to address it in that context and to see, actions being taken here to, stave off that optionality for people who, may want to use crypto for certain purchases. They may want to use the local fiat currency for others. But I think in an environment like that, where the inflation numbers that you mentioned are quite staggering, it would make sense to have some options in terms of having things to transact in. And I think it'd be a shame if that ends up not being accessible to them. So we'll see.
Yeah, and I would emphasize one.
Take it to the break.
Yeah, first of all, Steve says hi. Steve has decided to make an appearance today.
Hi, Steve.
But I think it's really interesting that they specifically use the term, we are trying to block disintermediation, which obviously for people who are familiar with crypto, that's a key term. We're about direct transactions between people. So to have the IMF come out and say, like, no, we cannot have direct financial interactions between individuals using these systems is, to me, pretty wild. It's saying we need gatekeepers, we need filters and censors and all of that stuff, and they're just coming right out and saying it. There I'm sure are some arguments for that, but I think there are a lot more arguments that we can't just assume that that's the way it's supposed to be.
Cool. All right, we're going to take it to the break. We're going to look at Steve and just think about him and how soft he must feel. Oh, Steve, you're looking good today. You're looking good today.
So cute.
All right. Steve is not going to be the next topic, but we're going to take a break. And when we come back from the break, we're going to talk about Andrew Yang, former presidential candidate, getting more into DAOs. This one, a DAO for Asian American and Pacific Islander issues. Interesting topic. We'll talk about that after the break. See you in a bit. See you, Steve. Looking good, buddy. Have a good one. Happy Friday. Hey there, we're talking about Andrew Yang and Golden DAO here on The Hash. Golden DAO is a social movement and also a decentralized autonomous organization organizing around the cause of Asian American and Pacific Islander issues. This comes on the anniversary of an Atlanta spa shooting that targeted 6 Asian Americans in a fatal shooting there, and comes at a time when DAOs are really hitting their stride as it comes to experimentation. You hear it often. DAOs are just a group chat with a shared banking account, and what this looks like is that in the realm of social activism. So it's cool to see Andrew Yang continue his journey down the Web3 rabbit hole. He is pictured there famously from Consensus 2019, powered by CoinDesk. He's sort of been on the outskirts of the scene. He made more of a presence, more of his presence felt at ETH Denver last month, the big Ethereum conference out there. So now he is, continuing his experiments with what Web3 can look like, both in the political side of organizing and on social issues. So this was interesting to see this piece come out yesterday. I'm going to toss this straight down to Jen for her initial thoughts. Yang obviously is not new to the Web3 scene, but he's certainly sort of ramping up his efforts, and particularly with an interesting experiment here.
Yeah, when I think about DAOs, I think this is the perfect use case, right? To gather around social activism and causes that really matter to people. I think fries and golf courses are really cool, but I think that fizzles, right? That fizzles after the headline. It's hard to keep the community engaged. And so I think that this is really awesome. We look at social media when everyone was posting that black square on Instagram for Black Lives Matter, and there was a lot of commentary about how that just fizzles. I think DAOs finds the people who are passionate about different issues and allows them to participate in really meaningful ways, in ways that they can interact with each other and also share funds to contribute those to to causes that matter to them, and for them to find ways to contribute to causes that matter to them in a fruitful way. And when I say a fruitful way, I mean in a way that they can find institutions and NGOs and not-for-profits that they believe in and that they know how the funds are being spent. So I think this is really cool, and just the next iteration of social activism in a way that speaks to the generation that's coming up. You know, they really love to support the causes they believe in. They're very vocal about that. They love to fly their flag. And so for me, this is just the natural iteration. And I think this is how we are going to see DAOs really take off.
Not to mention the fundraising aspect here. So this is something that could have brought in something like $9 million, which is great, which is a big budget for any nonprofit anywhere. But this one, through the power of crypto coins and through the power of NFT ownership, could draw in something like $9 million. We should have an update on this a little bit later today. Our colleague Tracy Wang was able to speak with Andrew Yang yesterday for a Q&A to get some more material about what the goals are of this group. But certainly a good way to incentivize contributions is to say, hey, here's your NPR tote bag. It's an NFT and it gets you into all these events. And that seems to be something that's motivating people to contribute to these causes if they feel passionate. I'm going to toss it down to you, David. I know you were at ETH Denver, maybe seeing the Andrew Yang show a little bit down there. What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I mean, I'm super bullish on this structure. I think that what we're now calling DAOs are a new digital social organization that's going to have, as Jen was saying, just more stickiness, more ability to keep people in the circle than groups that form on social media that are just ephemeral and you know it's just you pass in the night. There's no commitment. There's no incentives to stay engaged. I do think we are going to need to start. I think we need to start thinking about calling them something other than DAOs, because what we're looking at right now is essentially an organization that runs online through a Discord that has some token incentives and that uses money primarily to pursue its goals. But it's not autonomous per se. I mean, when we first started talking about DAOs back in 2014, 2015, there was this idea that there would be these more automated systems that performed a business logic, basically. That's really where the idea of DAOs came from. And the idea that they're going to be these social organizations is a little bit newer. It seems very compelling, but perhaps there's a discussion to be had about what we call them. Yeah. I think we're going to see these based in, this is sort of a national or even international thing, but we're going to see these based in local communities where specific organizations use the structure to do something in their community locally. There's going to be all kinds of different varieties of this. And I think the potential is really big. So I'm not always 100% on board with Andrew Yang, but this one, I think he's on the right track big time.
Worth mentioning, he also has Lobby 3, I think is the name of it. So it's like a Web3 DAO that is also sort of experimenting on the more political end of the spectrum. But yeah, he's definitely seems to be compelled or attracted to this idea of DAOs. And I think you're right. I think we should come up with another name. Sandali, do you have any new names for DAOs? What do you think we should go with here? What are these things?
I honestly have no idea, but I'm really bad at coming up with names for anything. My cats have the most boring names and like everything else. Anyway, but no, I'm totally with Jen and David on this. I think this is by far my favorite thing that Andrew Yang has done in a long time. And whatever it is, and what it will become, I think it's for a very important cause. And crypto is very much about community at the end of the day. And I think it's a great use of crypto's community building culture for something meaningful. So yeah, I mean, whatever it's called, and whatever it turns into, I'm here for it, and more power to this, I say.
Yeah, and
Zach,
we can actually
you're the best at coming up with names. I'm sure you have a name.
Who, me?
Yeah, Zach, you're like the name guy. You coined Eat to Earn.
No, I did coin Eat to Earn. That was pretty good.
Yeah,
that was pretty good. Eat to Earn was pretty good. All right, I'll think about it. Maybe I'll come back with something. Okay. Anyway, Jen, take it away to the next story.
Can I throw in one last comment before Jen's story, which is, I think we connect this back to Elizabeth Warren, right? You said, Sonali, a couple times, like, whatever this becomes, we don't know what it's going to become. It's going to evolve. It's going to change. And I think that people on, the Elizabeth Warren side of the ledger here need to keep that in mind, that, the more you clamp down, the more these possibilities get foreclosed. And DAOs in particular, because they're dealing with money, they are on the hook for some of these regulations. So something to keep in mind. Jen, you have our final story of the day about some apes.
Yeah, we need an ape I need to stop suggesting segments. Anyways, all right. The Bored Ape Yacht Club. Yeah, I know, right? The segments are pretty dope, I must say. Yeah. Bored Ape Yacht Club's ApeCoin has surged 90% on the second day of trading. So these apes just keep on getting richer. In the opening hours of the first day, the token sank 80%, falling to as low as $6.48. Before the show, I checked, it was sitting at around $14. The token was airdropped to Bored Ape NFT owners as part of the roadmap towards Ape DAO. So it's just all coming to fruition here. I think in June or July of last year, if we were to say that these Bored Apes were going to turn into what they turned into, and then there was going to be this token and an Ape DAO, a lot of people would have said we were all insane. But here we are in the future, living our best lives. Zach, I'm going to toss this down to you. When I saw the ApeCoin tank 2 days ago, I was like, oh, this might be bad. And then it just shot right back up. I'm curious what you took away.
Everybody's talking about ApeCoin. That's for sure. Mm-hmm. That is the buzz of the day over on crypto Twitter. Love it or hate it, ApeCoin is here. Big splashy airdrop. It looked like some people were going to get wrecked on this one, but it's sort of bounced back and may or may not stabilize. I will say the history of airdrops, we've seen this with like LooksRare, I think, with the rare token. There was like the SOS token. These exciting sort of experiments around how to decentralize popular services within Web3. Those historically haven't done very well, right? There's just like immense sell pressure, right? An airdrop is just a gift of free tokens. Typically, you can sell them on the open market, and a lot of people take advantage of that and do so. The sell pressure there makes for charts that often just kind of look like this, and then they sort of flatline over time. This one has had that first like dip, and then, sorry, my finger, I can't. I'm too dumb. I don't know where my finger is. Anyway, it had a dip and then it went back up, and we'll see what happens. It might go back down and then be one of those long tail assets that doesn't do anything. It might be something that sustains attention, energy, hype for at least the near and medium terms. But time will tell. It's been funny to watch this one. We were doing some reporting this morning. Our colleague Lila was looking into it. There was a free to play game that went play to earn and incorporated Ape as the token through which it was going to do that. So there's some thinking that maybe the speculation of future use cases is what's driving some of this price resurgence. Again, time will tell to see if that's actually the case. But for now, at least, there are people who are excited about receiving a pretty large airdrop of tokens, and whether it's something that lasts and has legs. History doesn't usually support that, but this one could be different, and we'll see if Bored Ape Yacht Club, which is really that first, maybe not first, but first token riding that momentum of like NFTs in the zeitgeist. We'll see what this looks like and whether or not it sort of materializes into anything resembling an actual governance token. David, I'm going to toss it to you though.
So, Zach, I'm going to ask you a question based on what you just said. Boy. What do you call an asset issued by a company whose value is based on the expectation of future use cases, in your words?
Oh, I'm not saying it. I'm not saying it. I'm not doing that. Gary Gensler, don't listen to this part.
Don't listen.
Yeah. So I have no idea what sort of legal framework they issued this token under. I'm sure that there is some complexity under the hood there. But one of the things that occurred to me is, I don't know if anybody remembers Uber, but Uber basically went into these markets where it was illegal and then operated under the radar long enough that people got used to it. And then when regulators came after them, they actually marshaled their customers to fight back against the regulators. This feels to me a lot like an Uber moment, intentionally or not, strategically or not, because if the SEC comes after the Bored Apes, it's not going to go well for the SEC. I'll tell you that right now, because that's a group of extremely vocal, extremely committed, I won't comment on their mental
state, influential.
but in some cases influential. Jay-Z, et cetera. Zach, sorry, you want to jump in before I continue ranting?
No, I mean, I think that's a great analog, right? I mean, Uber bent like local livery regulations to its will, right? And this may or may not happen with digital assets. But crypto for a long time has really benefited from flying under the radar and avoiding some of those fights that historically they have not been able to win. I think Jen's point is well taken, right? Jimmy Fallon is a big proponent of the Bored Apes, and Jay-Z, you name it, right? There's a lot of big famous people who have this, and you have people who are on this sort of governance council. Alexis Ohanian came out, big investor, said he was involved. It's going to be really interesting to see, right? I mean, when this launched, Bored Ape Yacht Club went to great lengths to like remove itself from the entity issuing this token, right? This was like totally a thing that ApeDAO was doing. It wasn't Bored Ape Yacht Clubs. It wasn't parent company Yuga Labs. It was like this thing, right? And the question will be over time is whether or not this sort of shell game will protect these founders from potential securities violations down the road. And just given how like slow the SEC moves, I think we're still in that era where the SEC is like catching up to the shady actors of the ICO days. And what is that, like 4 years ago now? 3-4 years ago?
6 years
ago. Again, I'm really curious what it's going to look like, in legal time. This whole era that we're seeing around DAOs, around airdrops, all this stuff is going to get really interesting in a few years when I don't know what it's going to be. I don't know what the catalytic moment will be, but it's going to be interesting to look back on this time and see what who lawyered up correctly and who didn't. But yeah.
I'll tell you what's going to happen based on experience. Yuga Labs is going to pay like a $30 million fine to the SEC. And by that time, they're going to have a market cap of about $40 billion. So, that's what's going to happen. I'll tell you right now.
Ooh, exactly. Block one playbook. You'll love to see it. All right. We're going to take a break there. Crypto, man. What a world. What a world we live in.
We're not taking a break, are we? I think we're shutting
it down.
Break until tomorrow.
I think the cops are coming. The cops are coming.
Until Monday.
We're going to take a 72-hour break. And when we return from our 72-hour break, we're going to do it all over again. Fresh and brand new on Monday. All right, everybody. Have a great weekend. David, Jen, Sondali, it's been a pleasure. Talk to you soon. Have a good one.
As always.
Bye, everybody.
Good to see everybody.
Yeah. See you.